So would you discuss about how was your PhD interview like?
Yeah, so we had a lot of interviews. Like the whole day was set up with different activities, and there was one section where you speak with like every professor kind of from the sub area. So I think it was 2 to 3, or maybe once even 4 professors and just you. So I was walked into this room and everyone is already sitting at the table, and I felt like it was just this giant panel, of like very senior people asking me questions. So it all feels really scary when you're there in the moment. But really, they're just like looking to get to know you, and there aren't really like right answers to it, like no trick questions or anything. So looking back, and now that we have a lot of students come in to these interview days, I really try to meet with them before this happens and just say, like, people are just interested in what's your motivation to coming, what do you want to achieve, like what are the goals that you have, and you just tell people honestly, these are the things that I want to get out of this program. That's what they want to hear, and there isn't really like a right or perfect response. So when I was going in there and having come from a bit of a different subfield, people are like, why are you making this switch? What are you doing? It threw me off, but I did have, a genuine reason, and I had a motivation to move into this area. So I just had to be telling a little bit of just that honest truth of like why I wanted to join them, and that it was my primary choice, right, to go into this area. So it was like the whole setup makes it feel more scary. I think that we've changed it a little bit now. So some schools might not do this kind of 4-to-1 like panel situation. But it was like just the moment you're in and the way you feel in that moment, I think just makes it most nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean, it has happened to us once, at least. Yeah. I remember once attending a developmental psychology interview. So my niche was not in that, but I was interested in the project. And I still remember, there were like around 4 to 5 people. And sometimes they might ask you some technical questions, but as you mentioned before, that they really want to see what your motivation is, and because that will be something that will keep you going throughout your PhD. So they really want to check that in addition to your technicalities, because that you can learn anytime. But it's a plus if you know it. But I mean, it's always good if you are motivated enough and know the reasons of why you want to do a PhD. And all right. So maybe just let us know, what are your plans after PhD?
Yeah, so it's coming up pretty soon, like when you're at that senior stage, and it's definitely a big part that you'll think about when you're also like entering a potential recession or like whatever is going on in the world right now. So that'll add a wrench to things. But I am interested in industry, and I have been even from when I entered the program. So that was something with the program that I chose. It was actually it was acceptable to talk about being interested in industry. It was an applied area, but not every school is kind of into that. So I was glad that they were very accepting of the goal to go into industry. And consulting is still sort of the most interesting area for me because there's a lot of variability. And after having worked on something very narrow for like very long, it's kind of nice to go across industries and functions and challenges to have different problems to solve. And kind of continuously improve by being thrown into new experiences every time. So that's what I'm hoping to kind of get into. And from there, I'm sure it's a process of specialization within the workplace. And hopefully I'm able to bring some things that I've already done to bear to the projects that I'll work on.
That's nice. Yeah. And it's a very different path, because most of us who are from the basic life sciences, we would definitely say that we want to do a postdoc. But in your case, it's different, which is also good because the people who are watching this know that there are different options and they are not just bound to one option. Yeah, there are always different possibilities. We should be just ready to try them. So
Yeah. I have a lot of colleagues like in postdocs and in postdocs for many years and in multiple postdocs. And I think that they deserve like a lot better. And I think that things have changed within the many years that they've been in it. But I just am sometimes sad because I see them trying to get, into industry and trying to develop those skills to transfer over. And I try as much as I can to sort of help them make that jump when they're realizing that the academic dreams are not going to really happen, because that's become a big challenge. But that's a whole other discussion, of course, to have.
Yeah, true. Yeah, would love to know your insights on that maybe sometime later. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah, up to me to sort of decide for others, but just from what I've noticed, there's definitely,
Mhm.
challenges I think we're all kind of seeing with regards to academics. And then the past couple months, now we shouldn't go all into it, but like in some countries with a lot of adjunct positions just being cut entirely. I think in the UK they're having a lot of issues with that. It's just a whole new dynamic to consider about what are the likelihood of succeeding in these different paths and kind of how long will it take before you go, okay, I'm going to try something else, because it's hard, but it might end up happening after a
Yeah,
while.
it's good to keep these things in mind. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just to go in it like realistically, for sure.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And so now I think it's a good, I mean, moving on to the next question, which is what are the tips that you would like to the new PhD students here?
Yeah, for sure. So try to distill it into three. One that is really relevant to the stage that I am at, and any time that you're creating or producing anything, that you're collaborating with others, sharing your work earlier than you think you should. So that's a tip that I would give, because let's say you're trying to work on a paper or you're working on a draft of the thesis, it might stay with me for like months more than it really should. I should just really be getting someone else's feedback.
Mhm.
Or if I'm stuck, I just say, here's what I'm doing so far. But it's hard to get that to that stage to be comfortable with
Yeah.
doing that. So that's really something to practice. It's almost practicing getting out of the comfort zone of like wanting things to be perfect, which I think is more common in the academic circles and the types of folks who go into a PhD than in the normal population. So we need to specifically work against some of those pressures of perfectionism, because then you'll never get it out, right? So we have to kind of give to someone, say, is this good enough? They give you some comments, you come back to it instead of trying to make it perfect the first time. That's kind of my first point. And in the vein of some of the stuff we're talking about with regards to social support, it's you're not alone, which is my main tip, like even though it feels really isolating. And especially the stages that you don't go through, with the same time as the rest of your cohort, or that you're not in these classes anymore, you're not studying for comprehensive exams with everybody, then you feel like you're just doing it completely by yourself after those pieces of the structure are gone. And so there's always an opportunity to join a writing group to kind of get to know some folks. Even right now, we're doing a virtual writing group with some different people who are also working on their dissertation. And it's nice to just look up on your screen and you see other people are kind of at their desks working just through their video. We all just take breaks every 25 minutes, come back 5 minutes later. We have like a whole structure that makes it feel a lot less isolating. So the tip is that there are people around, but you just have to go over that kind of hump of awkwardness and sort of worry to reach out to folks and remind yourself that it's not as isolating as it feels that it is. And finally, like being pragmatic or practical is something even the most academically minded people can benefit from, because it's always about precision as much as possible with research, but you can only do so much in one study, or you can only do so much at once, with your analysis. So realizing that you don't have unlimited time for a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation, the projects have to be doable when you come up with those proposals. It's actually way more about just practicality of getting done and getting it out there in a reasonable amount of time. I think the goal is always to do the best job you can possibly do, but realize that it's different at the stage of being a student with a limited funding schedule and all the different limitations that you have, as opposed to being a tenured professor who's like, I'm going to work on this for 10 years. I'm just going to explore and like see where it goes and do as best as I can. They have that kind of opportunity and timeline, whereas we don't have that timeline when we're starting out. So it's really just that practicality that I think helped me to land on a project early and figure out something that the data was like easy to collect, or I already had it, and say, how do I just kind of turn this into a final product sooner and try to achieve my goals of being done within a reasonable time, as opposed to taking lots of extra unfunded years later on, because that's been a challenge in our area for a while.
Yeah, that's true. And in relation to your first point, I really liked it because reproducibility is very important in science, and replicability. Sorry, I always like have this confusion while saying that word, but these two things are very important in science. And the more we share our data with others, and also the specific study design that we are following, then it's better to reproduce and see what are the implications of our research. So that's very important. And actually, all the 3 points points are very, very important. And even the third one, because many a times this happens when we are like too passionate about a topic, we tend to deviate and go very much deep into it and don't realize the time constraint. And then, we reach a point where we break down and don't know how much we have done. And yeah, this is very true. So these 3 points are so important for somebody who's new to this thing and who wants to do a PhD, to keep in mind these 3 points. Thanks for sharing this.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So then, in relation to this question, there's another one, which is what should be kept in mind while applying for a PhD position?
Yeah, so in regards to the motivation for it that we were talking about before, I really feel that like the research and learning from research should be the main goal. Though I recognize, of course, many people have some other, sub goals or alternative things that they also want to get out of the degree. When the main motivation is something different from like doing research, or the interest in research isn't there, I've noticed that a lot of folks have a really hard time finishing. And so starting off by thinking about what are my motivations, like what should I keep in mind before choosing to apply, I would really focus on that, because it is definitely one of the longer, more roundabout, less direct ways to achieve some of those secondary goals, like making a bunch of money. Can be done much faster in other forms as opposed to this.
That's true.
Getting to a senior degree, a senior position somewhere, it's also done more easily, but the research is really like the focus that I would.
Yeah, I mean, a PhD has like no way if you want to make money.
It's not going to be for the first like 7 to 10 years for sure, right? So if you're thinking of this as a way farther down the line, it wouldn't make as much sense. And so, but some people do think, prestige or money or seniority or credibility, or like those are all kind of something that you could totally aim for like on the side. But there's a lot of folks that I know, like the motivation is more like that. Like I feel like I have to do, a degree this way. I have to go all the way to this final level of degree. But I've noticed that folks like that, it just either doesn't end well at all because they don't finish like at all, or it takes like 8+ years just to do the PhD portion. And those are the challenges that you'll come up with when the research and getting that research done is not going to be your main motivator and the thing that really drives you.
Yeah. Very good point here. Yeah. I think very helpful for all the new people who want to do their PhD and are thinking of getting into such programs. Okay. And so what's the one PhD myth that you would like to discuss today?
Yeah, this one's about the support we were talking about and the sort of social folks around you, where I think the myth is that you should always be thinking about work. And even from the first day, I felt like it was something that I was supposed to be doing. And I hadn't even started, right? It was just like, I just got there and I was like, I guess every moment of my life is supposed to just be working on this and thinking about this and like dreaming about it and everything. But that can actually be super detrimental. And when you're never really off, like you never take any off time, then you're not really on as intensely as, you could be. Like if you detach, then you can come back and work in a very motivated way, be very dedicated to the work that you're doing for that time, as opposed to I'm just going to like fiddle around and come to the lab and chat with people. And sometimes it ends up taking way longer because we're not constrained by those other things, before and after. So this writing group is so interesting and is an example of busting this myth, because we have these 3-hour blocks. You work for 25 minutes, you have 5 minutes off. And I thought, this is not going to work for me. No, I need way more time than this. I have to work into the night. I have to do all this. I have to never take breaks, right? But in fact, you work very, very efficiently when you only have 25 minutes until you have to get up and take a stretch and go do something else. And I was surprised how much I got done within those first few days, because constraints actually push you to sometimes be more creative, sometimes get more done, and be more efficient overall. So I think that that's a lot better. Like the long spread out unfocused days that I have are not as one rewarding, 2 good for my health, or 3 actually as productive as really focused short time, maybe even a 6-hour day, take a break in the middle of the lunchtime or whatever, and then don't even look at it. Say, I'm actually going to shut off the computer, for example, in the evening. And you'd be surprised how much you then need to get done within 6 hours as opposed to like 18 or whatever, right? Because sometimes we can really stretch those days out quite long.
Yeah, because also we take it for granted that we have that much time in the day, and then we think that, we can slowly finish the task, but end up procrastinating, and then, yeah, that's true. But just
I
wanted
do
to know
that.
about this. Sorry, go ahead.
I definitely do that. The procrastination is,
Yeah,
it
me.
almost comes from feeling like
Mhm.
you have all day to do it. So that's a problem for me as well.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know about this virtual writing group. How did you guys come up with this? And is it based on Pomodoro technique?
Yeah, so that's exactly the timing that we're going for. And there's some great timers you can even use yourself online. Like if you search Pomodoro timer, and it'll just beep and tell you like when to go, come back. But it's actually through a different university just down the road. Some of my former colleagues who are now at that school, they added me to it. And so it's something people do in person. They have like retreats, on weekends, but because of the quarantine and lockdown, now people are doing this through Microsoft Teams. So they're
Yeah.
actually on Teams. Everyone joins the call. You have a little Zoom thing. We got all the little pieces, people's faces and stuff. And so someone will just have the timer and say, okay, it's work time. Everybody gets to work. So we're like working and we're like muted, but we got our little videos on, and then say, okay, get up and take a break. So I'm at home, obviously, like I'm like cleaning or I'm like tidying or I'm like drinking some water, like doing whatever I want, but it's like non-work things for 5 minutes, then we come back. So it's really nice to feel that, again, like it busts the isolation. So it really helps to kind of fight against some of those things that happen, especially senior level in the PhD. And writing a dissertation that's like hundreds of pages long and tens of thousands of words, it has to get done in these sort of bursts of effort. So it's really
Yeah.
helpful to make a lot of progress on these really big chunks. And it's been really fun to actually join people, talk about your successes at the end of the day, talk about your goals in the morning. Like there's a very organized process to it. And first I thought it wouldn't work for me, but it definitely works for me. And I'm like pretty convinced now, even though before I was like, I'm still going to procrastinate. It's going to be bad, whatever. But it actually ended up working quite well.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, I've seen some productivity videos and like have read some vlogs, and a lot of them talk about Pomodoro technique. And I was personally following it, not with a group, but yes, it does seem to work for me as well. And it's good. Sometimes I take like longer breaks when I feel so, but it's good to take breaks in between. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, you can double the break at like a certain specified time. And even just having, if you can stick to it yourself, it's great. If you need other people like there and having them say, okay, we're all going to get up now, like it almost kind of just helps you to get
Yeah.
into the flow of things. And so if that's what you need, try to find some of these, or create one with your fellow students, especially now that we're all at home and we can only do certain kinds of work, right? It's different for lab work. Obviously, you can't
Yeah.
Pomodoro, like your studies that you're running and stuff like that. They follow their own protocol, but it works out quite well right now that we're all in a similar situation.
Yeah, yeah, true. That's a good tip for everybody, actually, not just
Yeah.
for prospective students. Yeah. Okay, so if given a chance for you to decide again, will you still choose to do a PhD?
Yeah, I would, and I have a very like fortunate situation, so I think that would really drive that I would do it again. I know some people who like I don't think they would choose, to work with the same people or maybe like study the specific kinds of things they did. But it has like gone really well and quite smoothly for me in a lot of ways. So I think due to that and the opportunities that I've had, I would repeat it. But I could totally understand if some people are like, no, I had a miserable experience. Like I wouldn't have done it again. I would get it. But for me, yeah, I've had a lot of opportunity to do other things at the same time. So that helps me feel like I didn't lose out on anything that other folks
Good.
might sometimes feel.
Hmm. That's good. Yeah. And what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing a PhD? So pros and cons here.
Yeah, so I think, I would say that I would come back because of a lot of the advantages. There's a lot of learning, new techniques, new skills, and new knowledge. The fact that you're creating that new knowledge and not just like I'm learning something that someone else has already told me that you're discussing how we can move forwards in this whole field. It's like really fun. And the flexibility, like, support and guidance I find really helpful as well. Like, people know that you're trying to push past the edge of what is currently known. And so there is a lot of support for that, which sometimes you have to seek out. But I find that to be an advantage, as opposed to if you are working on something that has already been done, like other people know how to do it and they're just kind of waiting for you to get there. It's like, okay, like you have to just figure it out and rush to get to that finish line. So recognizing that it's all new, I think there's like some structure, support, and guidance like to help with that. And I prefer the flexibility. I think other folks, sometimes like, more structure, or they like more of a regular job that doesn't bleed into, the other days and your weekends and evenings. But I think the flexibility to do the kind of things during the degree and after that you want has really allowed me to be interested in industry and science communication and practical application, whereas other people in my area might be interested in just purely going into academia or interested in teaching. And with our program, and with generally a research-based program, because things are less structured, then there's the opportunity for each person to kind of do exactly what they want, as opposed to, more of a standard research-based program or kind of professional program where everyone is like choosing these courses and going through similar things. It doesn't have as much of that flexibility. So that might just be my program and my fields and area, but those are the things that I really enjoy. As far as advantages go, I think there's definitely disadvantages, and they affect different people differently. So if you're delaying when you start to like work and do other adult things, like if you're really interested in, having a house and a car and, doing all the kinds of things that you think of as being a standard adult, that sometimes you're not able to do those until later. So that can affect a lot of people. Really depends, I think, on like the lifestyle that you want to have and the one you have while you're in graduate school, how far away those are from each other. There's definitely, like we were talking about, the guilt, stress, the hours, because those can really bleed over and you can feel like you have to be working all that time. So that's another disadvantage. And sometimes, especially at this senior and I would say least structured time in the PhD, it's like pretty long, drawn out, like kind of unclear in terms of short-term goals, and you have to build in all of these little mini timelines and updates and progress meetings, and it's constructing how all that work gets done and doing it, which can be really hard to stay on track, especially at those times later on. When you have classes and it's due on this day, it's like really clear. And when you have to tell yourself that your thing is due on this day, it doesn't work the same. There's no like,
I was just saying that it requires a lot of self-discipline, and you have to be your own supervisor, although you have one, but they won't be, they won't be like, they won't be just telling you everything. They won't be micromanaging you, I believe.
Yeah. And I think that's just hard for everyone. Like, I knew that you had to be self-disciplined, but when you're in the environment of it, because none of it's really designed to make any of that easier, it's kind of designed to specifically work against, the way that you have to create all of these things and, nudge people multiple times and kind of coordinate all those meetings without feeling like you're bothering people who are very, very busy. So there's a lot about that requires self-discipline. And I think it's more than any of us naturally have really coming into it. So it's a process of developing it as you go, because everyone I know, like, we aim to be done at whatever time, but it's like really hard to get yourself going fast enough to get all that done.
And there are so many parameters that affect you. So maybe you are doing your best, but you are relying on others to, push that thing forward. And sometimes it just happens whenever it is supposed to happen. So
and you can't control it. Yeah,
true. Yeah,
for sure.
All right. So my next question to you is, what is something that a non-academic, what is something non-academic that your PhD has taught you?
Yeah, I think that from when I started, and maybe people going in more maturely to this process might already have learned these things, but I learned a lot about like the trade-offs just generally, and when you think of things in a complex way, you realize like the things that you're gaining, but also losing from different situations. So even in the advantages and disadvantages we just talked about, it's like, okay, you gain flexibility and learning, but you might trade off standard achievements and milestones in your life. Like there's a lot that you learn about those pros and cons in the work that you're doing, in the fact that in a given study, you know, the people who designed and ran it did some things well, but that was at the expense of something else. Like, there are more internally consistent